A monument to a past president at Bryn Mawr College is dividing students and staff.
Brick by brick, wall by wall, and Carrie Thomas's name must fall.
Today, nearly 200 students lined up at the college. At issue is a building named after M. Carrie Thomas. She was the college's second president. She was known for her contributions to female education, but she's also known for her racist and anti-Semitic beliefs. After much debate, the Board of Trustees at the college decided to keep Thomas's name on the building.
Y'all, I'm Alicia Garza, one of the co-creators of Black Lives Matter, and this is a message in support of the students at Bryn Mawr College who are fighting to remove monuments to white supremacy on your campus. Keep going. We know that it's time to take down all monuments and museums to white supremacy and replace them with a truer history of how this country was founded and the contributions that Black people and people of color and immigrants have made to this country.
I want to sprinkle in this investigation, at least with the Bryn Mawr side, some of the past protests that occurred before the strike we're witnessing, although technically, to a direct degree, they did not influence each other. The institutional memory of past protests with all of these strikes are pointed back to as it's been years in the making, but the directness of the connection beyond maybe, at least with the current story we're going to look into, where I think is about 2 students who were in this protest also helped with the strike organizing. There could be more, but I know of 2. There isn't a direct connection between these two, maybe beyond dissatisfaction. Well, actually, I shouldn't have put that in quote, but dissatisfaction with the not enoughness, because that's what you could put in the quotes, because the not enoughness is in definition with this only a group of people and maybe their supporters, but it's not a consensus of the school didn't do enough in certain situations. And one of that enoughness is brought up with the whole legacy of M. Carrie Thomas. The dealing with M. Carrie Thomas has a long history in the college, as in they have been trying to approach the issue of how to deal with her legacy, both what she brought to the college in good ways and what she brought to the college in bad ways, and what to do with that in a way that is proper and also agreed upon by not just the Board of Trustees and the school, but alumni and community members and staff members and of the like. So we're going to look at at least what I could find of the history of what the school has been addressing with M. Carrie Thomas and how that led to I guess you could say it was a protest. It was, from what I can see, a 1 or 2 day demonstration that probably had some lingering before and lingering after when it comes to the inscription of M. Carrie Thomas's name. That's where you get the kerfuffle. So let's start with this first article that is talking about a statement made in September 16th in 2017 of Kim Cassidy's remarks of this whole situation. Bryn Mawr College abiding work and core commitment is to sustain an educational community in which students study with rigor, embrace complexity, and pursue the excitement and challenge of discovery. And this is the commitment we're putting at the center of our engagement with Bryn Mawr's past. For several years, a series of discussions have taken place about the legacy and symbolism of M. Carrie Thomas as Bryn Mawr's spiritual founder because of renewed awareness of racist and anti-Semitic statements and actions during her tenure as president. Last spring, the college announced the formation of a broadly focused working group to address issues of exclusion and resistance across Bryn Mawr's rich history. National events kicked this discussion into high gear, and in the late summer, I declare a temporary moratorium on the use of her name to designate buildings and spaces on campus while we took up the questions together in a full and thoughtful way. For some, that decision didn't sit right. It seemed like a capricious act of historical revisionism, a placating of loud voices in the passion of the moment. But this temporary moratorium is not a rash move, nor is it about intolerance or political correctness run amok. Quite the contrary. By declaring a temporary moratorium while we assess the question, we have taken a concrete step to make it clear that the college rejects the racism and anti-Semitism that comprise part of the vision that shaped this institution. Sometimes remaining silent is not an option, because silence can be understood to speak volumes. A temporary moratorium does not end a controversy, then, but rather starts a conversation where we can do what Bryn Mawr does best: engage in a free, honest, rigorous dialogue in which all members of our diverse global community can encounter each other, consider positions based on intellectual and ethical merit, and emerge with a set of solutions and actions that leave us better than we were before. The working group will facilitate that dialogue, which will accumulate in a set of concrete recommendations. During this process, we will ask a lot of our students, and they will ask a lot of us. We understand that if you're going to challenge young adults to push boundaries, analyze issues critically, and pursue their passions, then they're not going to do that only in the classroom. They're going to question their campus community and its history and push for change. This is by no means a sign that they are intolerant, fragile, or dismissive of our history. To the contrary, this is a sign that they're doing exactly what we hope and expect them to do. Our longest-serving president, Martha Carey Thomas, created the organization and academic structure that still guides us today, a living argument for the necessity and value of a world-class women's college. She persisted through the institutionalized sexism of 3 different graduate schools across 2 continents to earn her PhD, and she produced scholarship that remained highly regarded for nearly a century. She was a leader in the suffragette movement and an early advocate for the Equal Rights Amendment to the Constitution. She set the highest standard for Bryn Mawr. She is also distinctive because so few women helped to create institutes of higher education. Other places that educated women early on, even many of the 7 sisters, were founded and guided by men. M. Carey Thomas is a towering figure at Bryn Mawr and beyond, and nothing will or should change that. But our towering figure casts a large shadow, and it is time for us to deal with that shadow fully and forthrightly. Although the record of her accomplishments sits a record of explicit racism, alongside the record of her accomplishments sits a record of explicit racism and anti-Semitism in both word and deed. Deeply influenced by the scientific racism of the late 19th and early 20th century, she saw the world in eugenicist terms of superior and inferior races, and racialized nationalities and religions, and she wove that racism into her feminism. In her opening address for the 1916 academic year, she argued that, if the present intellectual supremacy of the white races is maintained, as I hope that it will be for the centuries to come, I believe that it will be because they are the only race that have seriously begun to educate their women. She publicly fretted over potential loss of America's and Bryn Mawr's intellectual heritage from the mixing of what she called inferior races with the superior. She blocked the hiring of Jewish faculty and the admission of Jewish students. She argued that beyond a doubt, the pure Negroes of Africa had never in the history of the world manifested any continuous mental activity, and she worked against the admission of African American students. And also African American students, as you'll see in the Black at Bryn Mawr, when they were able to be on the campus, they had to go underground, and also most of the times worked in very low positions or in service positions that often were attributed to African Americans at that time. How do we weigh the facets of who she was and what she represents? I can imagine many possible responses, options, and outcomes that would enable us to honor the complexity of what M. Carey Thomas means to the diverse members of today's Bryn Mawr community. And that's what the working groups will do. Look at the issues from multiple perspectives, engage the community, and consider options for how to make the fullness of her legacy visible on campus moving forward. A thorough, ethical process enriches us all and produces outcomes we can respect. I have faith in this process because it draws on the essence of what makes Bryn Mawr Bryn Mawr. Signed, Kimberly Cassidy. As stated in this article, there was a working group created to address, or at least start to address how to address the issue of M. Carey Thomas and what to do about it. After a semester of investigation, the working group in May of 2018 came out with this statement, and we'll read the entirety of this one. The few to come will paraphrase, but this one I do want to read in its entirety. The History Working Group engaged in a semester-long process of research and learning about the history of Bryn Mawr and of listening to each other and to the many stakeholders of the college who engaged with us through letters, messages, and listening sessions. We did not start our working with trying to answer the question, what shall we recommend? We started with, what do we need to learn? We reviewed archival documents, considered the social and intellectual context of the college's founding, learned about M. Carey Thomas and her vision for Bryn Mawr, listened to community members' perceptions and experiences, and informed ourselves about how colleges and universities have addressed their institutional histories of racism and exclusion. We heard from many hundreds of alumni, faculty, staff, and students through formal listening sessions, letters, emails, and informal conversations, which helped to inform and guide our work. The Bryn Mawr community is multi-generational, international, and diverse in life experience and social identities. We heard many points of view. We learned of the great variety of relationships people have to the college, how they have experienced their time at Bryn Mawr, and how M. Carey Thomas figures in their thinking about Bryn Mawr, and even themselves. We began our work with questions. How and why were women's colleges founded? How was Bryn Mawr distinctive? What was M. Carey Thomas's intellectual direction? What were her goals and her vision for Bryn Mawr? How did her ideas about race and religion influence her thinking about the college? What were Thomas's personal opinions of what did she advocate publicly as a president of Bryn Mawr? How did Thomas's belief in eugenics shape her leadership of the college? What was racism and anti-Semitism of her time any different from the racism and anti-Semitism of our time? Was she typical of her time? How were her views about race and religion institutionalized in the early years of the college? Where are the remnants of that today? What do students, faculty, staff, and alumni know and not know about the college's history? How do current and recent members of the college's community experience the campus? How do we go forward as a community that values every member while acknowledging histories of harm due to racism and anti-Semitism at the college? How do we ensure that we do not erase histories but tell a fuller story of our history? How can we use our history to make us a better college? We hope that members of the Bryn Mawr community will engage with these questions themselves and will explore the reading list that we've made available on the college website. The working group's discussions reflected our various perspectives, knowledge, experiences, and academic disciplines, and all of us experienced shifts in our thinking during the course of our study. We did, however, agree on the following recommendations. We hope our questions, consultations, and reflections on historical evidence will help Bryn Mawr become more fully the college it aspires to be. Recommendations. The college should embrace the full nature of its past, owning these elements that are praiseworthy as well as those worthy of scorn. We have heard from community members across generations that they have valued learning about the history of the college through the working group's activities and have wished they had known it sooner. The college should provide both the materials and opportunities that will allow for fuller engagement with our past, including research funds, campus markers, historical displays and buildings, symposia, and other tools. The orientation of new faculty, staff, and students should include opportunities for learning and engagement with the history of the college. The institution needs to articulate and give voice to our historical narrative through all of the means available to us: the media, admissions, promotional materials, presidential statements, convocational speeches, publications, and the marking of our campus's physical space. The college should bring to a close the use of Thomas in reference to the old library and great hall and daily business of the college. Building names carry the ideological weight of their namesakes. The renaming of the library in honor of M. Carey Thomas in 1935 memorialized alumni regard for her at that time and their identification with her accomplishments. Our careful study and contextualization of Thomas and of Bryn Mawr's history in combination with our listening to many hundreds of members of this community have led us to understand that Thomas's name on our most iconic buildings has power. A college memorial should take into account the impact of it on the institutional mission. A college explicitly committed to inclusion should err on the side of creating campus spaces where all students, regardless of background, can learn, dream, achieve, and feel seen, heard, and valued. We have learned that the daily use of the Thomas's name on our most iconic building does not support that goal. The old library should continue to be preserved and acknowledged as a historical landmark and as an active center of teaching, learning, and celebration. The Thomas name etched on the building should remain, and a significant plaque or other museum quality display should be installed to annotate the history of the building and inform the public about M. Carey Thomas. We acknowledge that many of our alumni and others, the building will always be Thomas. The discontinued use of Thomas's name is emphatically not an act of erasure. It is a part of a necessary process of layering history upon history. Rather than a violent act taken against our history, it is in fact an act of confronting, preserving, and telling it. It represents what we, the living, want the college to be now and to represent to our students. In furthering the project of historical layering, the college should strive to elevate and amplify the voices of a wider range of individuals who have contributed to the history of the college. Working class men and women, people who were termed menial labor, should be acknowledged and recognized. This can be effected through signage, plaques affixed to college campus buildings, oral histories, and publications and installments that make use of photographs and archival material. We also recommend college investment in the Black at Bryn Mawr project and encourage the development of similar projects recognizing other groups who have helped to create Bryn Mawr over the decade. The college needs to continue the work of learning from past errors and endeavor to do the work of repair through pragmatic investments and allocation of resources to ensure equity of access to opportunities and educational outcomes for all students. The college historically has acted on the belief that the presence of women role models contributes to the long-term success of our students. The college should continue and intensify efforts that have been undertaken in the past few years to attract, retain, and support faculty and professional staff from underrepresented groups. We offer these recommendations for the consideration of the community and the Board of Trustees. We are grateful to President Cassidy for the opportunity to do this work and commend and support her commitment to building a diverse community of belonging. I don't know why that didn't strip me up. Respectfully submitted, Jennifer A.L. Walters, Convener of the Historical Working Group and Dean of Undergraduate of the College. I need to do vocal warm-ups before I read these things. I really need to do vocal warm-ups before I do these things. In summary, the Board of Trustees got this document and in the late summer of 2018 released a document supporting the working group's recommendations. In the whole document, they talk about Bryn Mawr's mission, what it means to name a building, the legacy of M. Carey Thomas, and the kind of flip-flopping of what she brought that was good and what she brought that was bad, and how that intertwines itself and the complexities in that. And they agree with the working group's decision of the renaming verbally the name of the buildings, but keeping the inscription for the sake of not uncovering the history, but confronting it and putting some kind of placard or statement or whatever they can do. When this was announced publicly, or at least when a statement was released in August of that year on Facebook, although I can't find this Facebook post specifically, there's 2 quotes in this article from it that show the differing views from different students. Quote, a student at the college wrote, "This decision is reprehensible. How can Bryn Mawr College side with the white supremacy over the lived experience of their current students? There is no equity nor inclusion in this, just more erasure of and disregard for students of color and Jewish students on this campus." But at least one alumni who was deeply critical of Thomas wasn't worried about the name. I have a degree from several institutions, BMC included, who glorified founders, leaders, and patrons of other eras who would have been horrified at my omission, she wrote. Maybe I'm just perverse, but I got a rich pleasure out of walking every day into libraries and classrooms and lecture halls that formerly would have been closed to me and still bear the names of those who bared the doors. Giving them the metaphorical finger of my presence gave me the determination to get what they would have denied me, my degree, and leave behind a very different legacy. Different perspectives, differing takes. And again, when they say the name, they're specifying the inscription on the building. The Thomas's building is now called Old Library, and then the other one's also called a different name, Great Hall, I believe. In the Framework for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion from the year 2018 to 2019, this is what it specifies in terms of both M. Carey Thomas and what they dub telling our histories for the coming year. Telling Bryn Mawr Histories Group. First project is to decide how to tell the story of M. Carey Thomas. This project will include developing a recommendation on signage and or display for Old Library that provides a full history of M. Carey Thomas's beliefs, work, and impact. Historical Infrastructure Group. Analyze technology, advising support, budget that can be best support college historical projects, student academic projects, and groups/grassroots efforts to tell our stories. Note, as part of the academic experience, students have opportunities to record and reflect on our histories with support and mentorship from faculty and or staff. The infrastructure group will help us determine the scale of infrastructure and resource to support, sustain, share, and preserve these important initiatives. Oral history groups, led by Dean Walters, this group will be trained in collecting oral histories and prioritize collecting the stories of retired and older employees of color with the goal of telling a broader range of lives and experiences that have immeasurably enriched BMC. Come September of 2018, there is a demonstration held by students, which is the video you saw in the opening of this. Though in this article about it, it says that there was a list of demands. I cannot locate those lists of demands. However, this statement was included on those. Bryn Mawr students are demanding that the board acknowledges and formally denounces Thomas's racist and anti-Semitic past, formally apologizes to current students and alumni for the harm that was caused in continuing to display her name on a monument in her honor, provide materials and support for engagement with Thomas's history in research funds and campus markers and historical displays, discuss clearly and purposefully and engage with Thomas and her history during orientation for new community members, display a plaque on the building itself that explains Thomas's racist and anti-Semitic beliefs, stating that they were wrong in her time and wrong now, and that they no longer represent the values of the institutions, protesters said in a statement issued over the summer. Almost everything in that statement is in the Working Histories document when they first investigated how to handle M. Carey Thomas, and the board approved it. It takes time. It was for this school year, the 2018 to 2019, that they were going to address this issue, that they were going to look into it and find ways to make the placards, to make the displays. Now, they don't talk about specifically in this whole issue, or at least explicitly, the painting and the bust monument and also the Woodrow Wilson sign, though we're going to see that in just a moment. So there are a few things that they, quote, didn't address, but were probably going to happen to be addressed as they continued the work. They were currently on all these things that the protesters listed the school had to do, except for the first two, which is talking about how leaving her name on the building is honoring her, when clearly both the Board of Trustees and the working group specified why they kept the inscription of the name, and also that they were going to put a plaque under it or somewhere, regardless of it, to show the impact of M. Carey Thomas and the decision to keep the name on there. And also the formal apologies to current students. I don't think anyone in the Board of Trustees or the working group was around during the 1930s. The apologies would be empty and performative, which I think the students would be against. I can't say the organizers in the sense, because the organizers don't exist yet. There's like I said, I know 2 students from the organizing group who were a part of this protest, or at least one was. So one person was there, but that's a very performative and almost empty action. There's a very big flip-flop between when an action's not empty and when a statement's not performative, but like, I still haven't picked up on that nuance. And also, keep in mind, formal apologies to current students and alumni for the harm that was caused and continue to display her name on a monument in her honor. They're assuming the opinion of different alumni and students. Sure, there probably is alumni and students who don't agree with the inscription, but there's also alumni and students who could be of color that agree, or at least have just a neutral standing of keeping the inscription's name on there. You can't just speak for the group because you know a few individuals of those groups that have that opinion. That doesn't speak for everyone. Now, in the Diversity, Equity, Inclusion Framework for the 2019 to 2020 school year, this is what they have for both the history and for M. Carey Thomas. The college will provide additional, more structured opportunities for interested students, faculty, and staff to collect and disseminate diverse narratives for the college's past. These will include a Center for Career and Civic Engagement workshop or intensive and oral history methods open to faculty, students, and staff, a LITS workshop on digital tools supported by the college for presenting and preserving histories, work with the Institutional Review Board to develop appropriate practices for collecting, archiving, and sharing oral histories, planning for a praxis course centered around exploring and expanding the college's archive, identify work study positions to support other students' projects. In keeping with the recommendation of the Telling History Group and the History Infrastructure Group, President Cassidy will establish the College History Advisory Group to provide ongoing input on college projects, programs, and approaches. Advisory to the president, the group, composed of staff, student, and faculty, many also provide input to other college departments and student groups. In keeping with the recommendation of the Telling Histories Group and the History Infrastructure Group and support by the President's Office, facilities and staff members will have taken steps to create a more contemplative and reflective space in the first floor of the old library to invite visitors to consider the college's formation up to its present. Due to the scheduled repairs to old library and the potential for damage and disruption, we will take initial temporary steps this year and a more permanent ones when construction work is completed in fall of 2020. Communications and LITS are working to mount physical displays of student projects that can be shared in this space, and we will add capacity for digital displays after completion of the building repairs. Wow, I had a little record stutter there. We will begin planning for a way to memorialize and honor those excluded from our marginalized within the college in the past. Yo! Words are not working with me right now. Communication, in collaboration with other offices, will make changes to modify the college's website. This ongoing work in progress will include modifying the histories page to make them more inclusive and more accessible to readers, and in recognition that there are many histories of the college and many voices who tell them, create a landing page for students, faculty, and staff project and exhibits, and provide easy access to resources to support history projects. The Pensby Center will continue to provide financial support for the Black at Bryn Mawr tours and will work with tour coordinator Jada Caesar to ensure ongoing staffing for the tours and to assist with leadership positions after Jada leaves. I might be pronouncing the JA there wrong, because I know sometimes it can have a ha noise, but I don't want to overestimate pronunciation, as you saw before with my own stuttering. So clearly, we're at the 2019-2020 school year. There was some stuff going on. There was a initiative going on. There was a deep contemplative movement of how to confront M. Carey Thomas's legacy. It may not hold the things that some of these my instinct is to say organizers, but that's not the case here, that some of these students have, but clearly there's something going on. The problem is it's not enough. That seems to be the reoccurring theme with a lot of these protests. It's not enough. It's not quick enough. It wasn't said with the right words. And the way that this not enoughness, not right words, and not quick enoughness is confronted is not through some kind of other means, because clearly not enough, not quick enough, and not worded right are issues that could probably be addressed in manners that aren't drastic. If the college decided not to do anything about the M. Carey Thomas thing, just said the past is the past, we're moving forward, and not to do any confrontation with the history, that, in my own view, would justify from people who disagree some sort of upfront protest or movement to say, hey, can we try to do something that discusses the complicated history of M. Carey Thomas? But here, that isn't the case. The college itself, the president, stepped up and initiated this moment and this movement to look into her legacy. It was the not enoughness and the not timeliness and the not right wordedness of it that is the disagreement, which you're allowed to have. I want to make distinct the difference between the college isn't doing anything and the college isn't doing what I want it to do. There's a difference between those two, and it's a very big difference if you're trying to look at how to address the college's not enoughness, or how a person should or could. They could just still do the strike, but certainly a not enoughness could probably be delivered and talked about in different means that isn't just this broad overview of like, not enough, oh, that means not doing anything, we gotta strike. It's like, no. Now, I don't talk about the strike, because that they point back to the college not doing anything or not doing enough, and that's for the strike. The not doing enough connects to the not doing anything. It's not that there's a not enough, but stuff is still being done in certain regards. No, it's that because this not enough isn't addressed, because what we define as not enough isn't addressed, that means nothing good is happening. We can't acknowledge this other thing that's going on. Whew. Why is this getting more signatures? Why is it getting more signatures? I found this change.org position from 2019, and I have no idea why change.org is making it look like there's people signing this live when that's not the case. Okay, the numbers stopped changing, but I want to read this because even though I believe this did not cause any kind of uphill, it shows the whole monologue that I just described. Across the world, protesters have been removing monuments to racist and imperialist figures from their cities. These include many Confederate monuments in Virginia, South Carolina, Arkansas, Mississippi, North Carolina, and Alabama, as well as monuments of slave traders and figures who created our current police state, such as Philadelphia's own Frank Rizzo. Bryn Mawr has a difficult history with race, and as such has many figures within our college's history that are deeply problematic. In 2018, there was a movement to change the name of M. Carey Thomas's library to Old Library in order to remove her legacy from our college as a modern institution. We feel these changes made by the Equity and Inclusion Framework of Action 2018-2019 are not nearly enough to markedly change our institution's legacy. Now, the Old Library, that's the change. The verbal announcement of the building is changed along with scholarships that had Thomas's name. It's now the Bryn Mawr College Award or something of that like. But they just don't think it's enough because the inscription's still there. To continue. In solidarity with these protesters and in response to the comments from many Black, Jewish, and Indigenous students, we are asking Bryn Mawr to remove monuments attempting to honor the legacy of these figures. Specifically, we are asking for the bust of M. Carey Thomas in Kennedy Library to be removed from public viewing and the Woodrow Wilson historical marker to be either removed or replaced with one that more accurately demonstrates his racist and sexist legacy. Additionally, if possible, we would like to remove M. Carey Thomas's name on the front of Old Library in order to demonstrate our college's dedication to change is visually demonstrated. In this specific Change.org article, along with how the organizers approach this, they never mention the fact that the working group and Cassidy, on that first website that I read, there's another link to a website that has alumni comments about the first initiative of holding the moratorium on Thomas's name. They never address that. They don't ever go into like, we know that there was a bunch of alumni and students and staff and faculty who were consulted about this, but it doesn't matter because these other people disagree. Like, at least could you verbally say that? Because that's what is implicitly implied in all this mentioning of like, these people had these comments and so we should do this. These other people have other comments that are more nuanced and even in disagreement, but it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Whatever excuse they'll use. And here you'll see this is where they start asking for a little more. They start asking for the bust. I don't know if they mentioned the portrait in here, but they mentioned at least the pieces to be removed from public viewing, which in Cassidy's response to the first round of demands, she mentioned some kind of initiative to discuss how to handle those pieces of artwork. And the Woodrow Wilson thing, as we saw in that first response to the demands, it's not on a college property, but Cassidy is a part of an initiative to talk about reviewing what we could do about the Woodrow Wilson sign. To continue with the change.org position, we recognize that many of these monuments are protected by the National Historical Society, but so were many of those torn down by protests in the last few weeks. Great reasoning. We believe you can preserve historical knowledge without honoring or revering figures who caused great suffering. We ask that the Bryn Mawr administration collaborate with the National Historical Society to recognize the impact Woodrow Wilson and M. Carey Thomas had on both our institution and our nation, but not celebrate them as historical figures through monuments. Additionally, we ask that any efforts to change the legacy of our college heavily involve Black, Jewish, and Indigenous students, staff, and faculty collaboration, blah, 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 all that. Which they did for the working group. It is said in the document. They interviewed hundreds of different students, faculty, staff, alumni, current, past, present, future somehow. But no, it has to be the specific, or they have to include the voice of these people, which I believe, or at least I can assume, even if they did include these type of people, there would have still been other people with nuanced and disagreed beliefs, which would cause higher complexity in addressing the issue. What do you know? Things aren't just straight up black and white. I'm still also confused on the fact that there's like the statement of like white supremacy culture, and one of the beliefs of white supremacy is black and white. And yet that's what I see whenever these protests with these organizers and with some of the stuff we just saw here with past protests. It seems a very black and white regard for certain ideas. I don't know, or I have not seen someone explain why that double standard is approved. Why they have the moral right to call things black and white and say if it's not done, or to keep pushing the it's finished borderline. So it's not just the renaming orally of the library, it's getting rid of the inscription, or at least getting rid of the monuments. And then maybe the inscription. Oh, you were having something worked done with getting the monuments out of public viewing? Well, now we want to talk about the inscription. Even though we said it's like a additionally, if possible, inscription, now you have to do it. It's just, it keeps moving the goalpost. I can't remember off the top of my head the specific points the organizers made, but in the second iteration of the demands, which I'm filming this after I filmed the long iteration of the TRICO thing, so I can't remember the placement in this if we have read already the second round of demands, but we will if we haven't, and if we did, then this comment will make sense. But there is a huge, at least 2 to 3 page clarification of if M. Carey Thomas's inscription is to remain, and they go through steps of how to deal with the historical society and the funding going towards it and these ways of creating the legacy. And again, I can't recall specifically the point made in that, if they're like still trying to argue why it should be taken off, or if they're arguing why it shouldn't be recognized, why the building should not be recognized as a historical monument because of this past. But it still rings back to my general theme of, it doesn't seem like the organizers really tackled with the work of the history of Bryn Mawr that the Bryn Mawr College had already been trying to do. It seems like they just saw that what they wanted, what they now want, isn't done, which is the inscription on the building, and so thus nothing's happening. When it's not enough. It's not that nothing's been happening, it's just not enough in your definition, which is your definition, or a group's definition, or a small group with a few different people from different groups that somehow have validity and moral right to say what is right. It's messy. It's complex. All these things are complex and messy. However, even though this is not done on a particular day, there's no particular day where they have an M. Carey Thomas information session, I still want to put this in the telling in this point in time, because I feel it is important to see how the school has been doing this work that continuously has been talked about, either that's not happening or not credited properly, even though in those documents they credit the multiple people they spoke to, and they credit the working group, which credits the multiple people they spoke to, which credits the people they spoke to, which come from many different groups and statuses and work histories with the college. There's M. Carey Thomas for you. Make up your mind what you think is the right thing to do, and at least within that, making up your mind of what the right things to do, hold within that stuff has actually been going on and being done. not that the college isn't doing anything. It's just not doing enough within certain standards of certain people.